In a quiet rural town, where gossip travels faster than the morning breeze, Sarah Reynolds Montgomery arrives under the cover of anonymity. Behind her dark glasses lies a secret. She's a millionaire who left everything behind, searching for someone who could love her for who she is, not what she owns. Enter James Cooper, a struggling single father who takes a job as her personal assistant, helping her adjust to life without sight. Each day, he reads to her in the garden, their laughter mingling with the chirping birds, while his young daughter Emma brings unexpected joy to Sarah's world. James offers kindness without asking for anything in return, unaware that the woman he's growing to love could change his life forever. But will Sarah's revelation of her true identity shatter the authentic connection they've built? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. James Cooper's fingers traced the worn spine of The Little Prince as he placed it back on the shelf of Cooper's books. The morning light filtered through the dusty windows of his small bookstore, illuminating dancing particles in the air. The shop bell hadn't rung in hours. He glanced at the stack of unpaid bills on his desk, their red final notice stamps seeming to glow brighter with each passing day. "Daddy, look what I drew." Emma's voice pulled him from his worries. His 8-year-old daughter sat cross-legged, in her usual corner, surrounded by paper and colored pencils. Her dark curls, so like her mother's, fell across her face as she held up her latest masterpiece. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he said, managing a smile as he looked at the crayon, drawing of their bookstore, complete with a rainbow arching over it. If only rainbows could pay bills. The familiar creak of the shop's door drew his attention. Mrs. Henderson, his elderly neighbor, shuffled in with her morning paper tucked under her arm. "James, dear, have you seen this advertisement? They're looking for someone to help that mysterious new woman who moved into the old Peterson place. A personal assistant, it says. The pay looks quite generous." James accepted the newspaper, his eyes scanning the carefully worded advertisement. The position seemed straightforward enough. Reading, basic household organization, and companionship. In for a vision-impaired woman. The salary listed made his heart skip a beat. It was more than triple what the bookstore had made in its best month. "I couldn't possibly," he started. But Mrs. Henderson's knowing look stopped him. "And why not? The store is quiet enough that Emma can do her homework here after school, and you've always been good with people. Besides," she lowered her voice, though they were alone in the store, "word is, she's quite particular about her privacy." Turned. Down half the town's welcome wagons already. That evening, after tucking Emma into bed with their nightly reading ritual, tonight's chapter from The Wind in the Willows barely registered in his mind, James sat at his desk, staring at the advertisement. The thought of working for someone else felt like admitting defeat, like betraying his father's legacy embodied in this small bookstore. But Emma's college fund remained empty, and the stack of bills grew taller each month. His fingers hovered over his phone before he finally picked it up, dialing the number listed. A crisp, professional voice answered, not the mysterious woman herself, but her lawyer, Mr. Harrison. They arranged an interview for the following morning. Sleep eluded James that night. He lay awake, thinking about his late wife Claire, wondering what she would advise. "Do what's best for Emma," she would say. She always knew how to cut through his pride to the heart of things. The interview location surprised him. Not the grand old Peterson house, but the small law office downtown. Mr. Harrison, a sharp-dressed man in his 60s, studied James's resume with careful consideration. "You own Cooper's books," he stated, not asked. "Why seek additional employment?" James swallowed his pride and told the truth. "My daughter deserves better than what I can provide right now. The store was my father's dream, but Emma is mine." Something in Harrison's expression softened. He closed the resume folder. "Miss Reynolds Montgomery values honesty above all else. She needs someone patient, discreet, and kind, someone who understands the value of stories." He paused, studying James. "The position is yours if you want it. Just like that, just like that. Though I should mention, Miss Reynolds Montgomery has one non-negotiable condition. You must sign an extensive non-disclosure agreement. Her privacy is paramount." James left the office an hour later, his signature on multiple documents and a new job title to his name. As he walked back to his bookstore, the morning sun warm on his face, he wondered about the woman who would trust a stranger with her daily life, while hiding behind such careful legal barriers. Emma was waiting at the store, their elderly neighbor, having walked her from school. "Did you get it, Daddy?" Her eyes sparkled with hope, and James felt the weight of his decision lift slightly. "I did, sweetheart. Things are going to get a little better now." He hugged her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "We just have to be very good at keeping secrets." Emma's eyes widened with excitement. "Like spies?" James laughed, the first genuine laugh in weeks. "Something like that. Now how about we celebrate with ice cream before dinner? Just don't tell Mrs. Henderson." As they walked to the ice cream parlor, hand in hand, James couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't imagine. The worn copy of The Little Prince sat in his bag. His father had always said it was good luck to carry a book to important meetings. Tomorrow, he would meet the mysterious Miss Reynolds Montgomery and begin a new chapter in their story. The Peterson house stood like a sleeping giant in the morning mist, its Victorian architecture a stark contrast to the modest homes surrounding it. James checked his watch, 7:55 a.m., then glanced at Emma fidgeting beside him in her school uniform. His regular babysitter had called in sick at the last minute, leaving him no choice but to bring Emma along on his first day. "Remember what we talked about," he whispered, straightening Emma's collar. "Be extra quiet and do my homework," she recited, clutching her backpack. "And no exploring without permission." The gentle tinkling of wind chimes drew their attention. Dozens hung from the wraparound porch, dancing in the breeze, creating a symphony of soft, crystalline notes. Emma's eyes widened with wonder. "Those help me know which part of the house I'm in," a soft voice explained from the doorway. Sarah Reynolds Montgomery stood there, one hand resting lightly on the doorframe. Her dark glasses caught the morning light, and her posture spoke of careful grace. Each section of the garden and porch has its own sound. James cleared his throat. "Miss Reynolds Montgomery? I'm James Cooper. I apologize, but there's been a slight—" "Your daughter's with you," Sarah finished, her head tilted slightly. "I can hear her breathing, small, quick breaths. She must be nervous." A warm smile spread across her face. "Don't be, little one. I have cookies in the kitchen that need tasting. That is, if your father doesn't mind." Emma looked pleadingly at James, who found himself nodding before remembering Sarah couldn't see it. "That's very kind of you. Emma's babysitter is ill today." "Serendipity, then," Sarah said, stepping aside to let them enter. "I was dreading a formal first day. This is much better." The interior of the house was a study in careful organization. Everything had its place, with clear paths between furniture. The wind chimes music filtered in through open windows, creating an almost magical atmosphere. In the kitchen, Sarah moved with practiced ease, retrieving a cookie jar from a shelf. "Everything in my house has its place," she explained, setting it on the counter. "It's like a map I carry in my mind. Emma, would you like to help me count out 3 cookies? Sometimes my fingers need a second pair of eyes." Emma stepped forward, her shyness melting. 1, 2, 3. They smell like chocolate and orange. Very good, nose. That's my secret ingredient. James, there's coffee in the pot. I can hear it calling your name. As they settled into this impromptu breakfast, James watched in amazement as Sarah engaged Emma in conversation, asking about her favorite books and school subjects. His daughter's initial nervousness had completely vanished. "So you help Daddy at the bookstore?" Sarah asked, leaning forward with interest. "I'm the official storyteller for the Little Kids' Corner on Saturdays," Emma announced proudly. "Daddy says I do the best voices." "I'd love to hear them sometime," Sarah said softly. "It's been a while since anyone read to me with different voices." James caught the hint of loneliness in her tone, and something in his chest tightened. Despite her elegant appearance and composed demeanor, there was a vulnerability to Sarah that he hadn't expected. The kitchen clock chimed 8:30, breaking the spell. "Oh, Emma's going to be late for school," James started, but Sarah was already reaching for her phone. "I took the liberty of asking my driver to wait. Thomas can drop Emma at school if you trust us with that task. It seems silly to interrupt. This lovely morning." James hesitated, but Emma's hopeful expression and Sarah's genuine smile won him over. After walking Emma to the car and giving Thomas strict instructions, he returned to find Sarah clearing the coffee cups with practiced movements. "I hope you don't mind that I commandeered your morning," she said, placing the cups in the sink. "I find that formal beginnings often lead to formal relationships, and I'd rather skip that stage if possible." "It was perfect, actually," James admitted. "Though I should warn you, Emma might want to come back for more cookies." Sarah's laugh was unexpectedly bright. "Good. A house needs children's laughter. Now shall we begin our official day? I believe there's a garden that needs describing. And I've been told you have quite a way with words, Mr. Bookstore owner." As they stepped out onto the porch, the wind chimes welcomed them with their celestial chorus, and James found himself thinking that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected arrangement would work out better than he'd dared to hope. Autumn settled over the town like a warm blanket, and with it came the comfortable rhythms of their new life. The antique reading chair in Sarah's library became the heart of their days together, crafted from rich mahogany with deep burgundy. Upholstery. It sat in the corner where afternoon light streamed through tall windows, creating a sanctuary of words and warmth. "Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again," James read, his voice carrying the weight of Daphne du Maurier's words. Sarah sat in her favorite spot by the window, fingers absently tracing patterns on her dress as she listened. "Your voice changes when you read classics," she observed, a smile playing at her lips. "It becomes more reverent." James paused, marking their place with a silk bookmark. "My father used to say that classic books are like old friends. They deserve our respect." "Smart man, your father." Sarah turned her face toward the warmth of the sun. "Tell me about the library, James. I know the layout by heart, but I want to see it through your eyes." These requests had become common between them. Sarah seemed to collect his descriptions like others might collect photographs, storing them, away in her mind to revisit later. "The afternoon sun is turning the oak shelves golden," he began, settling into the familiar rhythm of their exchanges. "Your first editions are catching the light, their gold lettering winking like stars. There's dust dancing in the sunbeams, and the old globe in the corner is casting shadows that look like continents drifting across the floor. And the chair you're sitting in? Ah, your father's reading chair." James ran his hand along the worn armrest. "The leather's soft as butter now, shaped by years of storytelling. There's that small scratch on the left arm where you used to grip it during scary stories. You told me about that last week." Sarah's expression softened at the memory. "Dad would do all the voices like you do for Emma." The mention of his daughter made James glance at the clock. "Speaking of Emma, she'll be here soon. Today's a half day at school." As if summoned by her name, the distant sound of wind chimes announced Emma's arrival. She bounded into the library, school bag swinging. "Sarah, Daddy, you'll never guess what happened in science class today." Over the past weeks, Emma had claimed the plush window seat as her homework spot, spreading out her books while James read to Sarah. Sometimes she'd join them, adding her own commentary to the stories or requesting her favorites. "Mrs. Phillips gave us a project about the solar system," Emma continued, pulling out a slightly crumpled assignment sheet. "We have to make a model, and I was thinking—" She hesitated, glancing between them. "What is it, sweetheart?" Sarah encouraged, turning toward Emma's voice. "Could we maybe work on it here? The library has so much space, and Daddy said you have books about astronomy and—" Emma's words tumbled out in a rush of excitement. James started to protest. They were here for work, after all, but Sarah was already nodding enthusiastically. "On one condition," Sarah said, her tone serious but her lips twitching. "You have to let me help. I may not be able to see the planets anymore, but I remember their order perfectly. Mercury's surface is hot enough to melt lead, you know." Emma gasped with delight. "Really? What else do you know about planets?" And just like that, their afternoon reading session transformed into an impromptu astronomy lesson. James watched as Sarah described the solar system from memory, her hands moving through the air to demonstrate orbital patterns, while Emma scribbled notes furiously. Later, as James packed up Emma's school supplies and prepared to close another day, Sarah caught his arm gently. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For sharing your daughter with me, for filling this house with voices and laughter again, for making it feel like—" She paused, choosing her words carefully, "like home." The simple honesty in her voice made James's heart skip a beat. He covered her hand with his own for a moment, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. "Thank you for giving us a place to belong." As they walked out through the garden, the wind chimes singing their goodbye symphony, James realized that somewhere along the way, these daily rhythms had become more than just a job. They had become the favorite chapters in his ongoing story, ones he found himself eager to return to again and again. The Financial Times lay forgotten on Sarah's desk, its headline partially visible beneath a stack of papers. "Reynolds Montgomery Industries announces mysterious CEO sabbatical." James noticed it while organizing Sarah's study, but quickly looked away, remembering the non-disclosure agreement he'd signed. Still, these little hints of Sarah's other life had been accumulating like breadcrumbs leading to a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to find. "Yes, Richard, everything is proceeding exactly as planned." Sarah's voice drifted from the garden, where she often took her private calls. "The board can handle things without me for now. I need this time." James busied himself with straightening books, trying not to eavesdrop, but finding it impossible not to hear. "No, I haven't told them yet. How can I? The whole point was to find someone who—" She stopped abruptly, likely sensing his presence. "I'll call you back later." The garden door opened, and Sarah stepped inside, her composure perfect as always, but her fingers fidgeting with her necklace, a tell James had come to recognize as nervousness. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I was just organizing your study. The books were getting a bit cluttered." "It's fine, James," she smiled, but it didn't quite reach her face behind her dark glasses. "Actually, would you mind making some tea? Earl Grey, if we have it." As James moved to the kitchen, his mind wandered to other curious details he'd noticed. The designer labels inside her clothes when he helped with laundry, the casual mentions of places like Monaco and Singapore in her stories, the way her lawyer called 3 times a week for routine updates. Emma's voice broke through his thoughts as she skipped into the kitchen. "Daddy, look what I found in the upstairs bathroom." She held up a small crystal bottle. "It smells like flowers from heaven." "Emma," James scolded gently, "we don't go exploring private areas of the house." "But Sarah said I could use her bathroom when mine was having the weird noise," Emma protested, "and this was just sitting there. The bottle says Chanel." Sarah appeared in the doorway, drawn by their voices. "Is that my perfume? Do you like it, Emma? It's the prettiest thing I've ever smelled. But Daddy says it's private." "Nonsense," Sarah laughed, the tension from earlier melting away. "Every young lady should have her first experience with fine perfume. Would you like to know? A secret. That was my mother's favorite. She used to say a little drop of luxury makes any day special." James watched as Sarah knelt down, carefully taking Emma's small wrist. "Here, let me show you how to apply it properly. Just a tiny dab, like this." She demonstrated with practiced elegance, and James suddenly had a vision of Sarah in another life, attending galas, running board meetings, moving through a world far removed from their quiet town. "Now you smell like a princess," Emma declared, throwing her arms around Sarah's neck in an impulsive hug. Sarah froze for a moment, clearly surprised by the gesture, before softening into it. Over Emma's shoulder, her face showed such naked longing for connection that James had to look away. Later that evening, after Emma had gone home with her homework and her newly scented wrist, James found Sarah in her study again. She sat at her desk, fingers running over what he now realized was a Braille financial report. "James," she called out softly, "would you read something to me? Something simple, a children's story, perhaps." He understood the request for what it was, a desire to return to their uncomplicated relationship of reader and listener, employer and employee, before the weight of unspoken truths hung between them. "How about The Little Prince?" he suggested, reaching for the worn copy he'd brought from his store. "It's Emma's favorite." "Perfect." Sarah settled into her chair, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "You know, they say the most important things in life are invisible to the eyes. Is that why you came here?" The question slipped out. Before he could stop it, "To find something invisible?" A complicated smile played across her face. "Maybe I came to find someone who could see me." She paused, then added softly, "Just me." James opened the book, his throat tight with words he couldn't say. Instead, he began to read. "Once when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book." As the familiar story filled the room, he noticed Sarah's financial papers still scattered across the desk, the expensive perfume lingering in the air, and the weight of secrets pressing against the windows like the gathering evening darkness. But for now, they let the simple magic of a story about a prince, a rose, and the things that can only be seen with the heart wrap around them, like a protective spell, keeping the complicated truths of their real world at bay for just a little while longer. Emma's colored pencils scattered across Sarah's kitchen table, her tongue poking out in concentration as she worked on her latest masterpiece. The afternoon sun painted everything in honey gold tones, and the smell of baking cookies filled the air. These after-school art sessions had become a regular occurrence, with Sarah sitting nearby, asking questions about Emma's drawings and offering encouragement. "Tell me about this one," Sarah requested, her hand hovering near the paper as Emma guided it to different sections. "This is you, and this is Daddy, and this is me," Emma explained, moving Sarah's fingers across each figure. "We're in your garden, and there are all the wind chimes, see? I drew music notes coming from them." James, measuring ingredients for another batch of cookies, a skill Sarah had insisted he learn, glanced over at the drawing. His heart caught at the sight. 3 figures holding hands, surrounded by flowers and music notes, with huge smiles on their faces. They looked like a family. "The wind chimes sound extra happy today," Emma continued, adding more musical notes. "Like they're singing instead of just tinkling." Sarah's fingers traced the paper gently. "And what color did you make my dress?" "Blue, like the one you wore when you let me try on your pearls. Daddy said you looked beautiful that day." Emma's innocent comment made James nearly drop the measuring cup. Sarah's cheeks flushed pink. "Did he now?" "Cookies need checking," James announced quickly, grateful for the excuse to turn away. But he could feel Sarah's smile following him, warm as the afternoon sunlight. Later, while Emma was absorbed in her art, Sarah moved to help James with the dishes. Their hands met briefly in the soapy water, and neither pulled away immediately. "You know," Sarah said softly, "I never thought I'd enjoy domestic tasks again. After losing my sight, everything seemed overwhelming. But here, like this..." She paused, searching for words. "It feels like home," James finished for her, then added hastily, "At least, that's what Emma says." Sarah's smile turned knowing. "Smart girl, your Emma. She did another drawing yesterday, asked me to keep it secret. She called it Our Future Family." James felt his chest tighten. "Sarah, Look, Daddy," Emma interrupted, running over. "With her latest creation. I drew Sarah's garden in all 4 seasons. See, here's spring with the daffodils, and summer with the roses, and fall with the red leaves, and winter with snow on the wind chimes." Sarah reached out, and Emma, naturally, took her hand, guiding it across the paper. The gesture was so automatic now, so trusting. It sounds wonderful, Emma, but you know what would make it perfect? If you added the stories your father reads to us in each season? Oh, like Secret Garden in spring and Little Women in winter. Emma bounced with excitement. Daddy, can I use your special colored pencils from the store? Of course, sweetheart. They're in my bag. As Emma rummaged through his satchel, Sarah leaned closer to James. She's not the only one who sees it, you know. This future she draws. Before James could respond, Emma returned triumphantly with the pencils. Sarah, can I draw in the library? The light's better in there. Take a cookie with you, Sarah smiled. But remember, no crumbs in the books, all three said in unison, then laughed. Once Emma had skipped away, Sarah turned back to James. I never thought I'd have this. After the accident, I assumed certain dreams were, well, no longer visible to me. But your daughter, she helps me see things I thought I'd lost forever. Sarah, James began, his voice rough with emotion. No, let me finish. Every drawing she makes, every story you read, every mundane moment like doing dishes or baking cookies, they're becoming my new way of seeing, my new photographs, my new memories. She reached for his hand, finding it unerringly. I'm not. Sure, I could bear losing them now. The honesty in her voice, the vulnerability, made James's carefully maintained professional boundaries waver. He found himself squeezing her hand gently. Then don't. We're not going anywhere. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of Emma humming in the library and the gentle chorus of wind chimes from the garden. The afternoon sun continued its slow dance across the kitchen floor, and James realized that somehow, without his noticing, this had become the most natural place in the world to be. Later, when Emma proudly displayed her completed 4 seasons drawing, complete with tiny books and reading figures in each panel, neither James nor Sarah mentioned the way their hands stayed linked beneath the kitchen table, or how right it felt to be together, just like this. The local newspaper sat folded on Mrs. Henderson's counter at the general store, its headline barely noticeable. Reynolds Montgomery Industries expands global reach. But it was the small article below that caught whispers. Mystery surrounds. CEO's extended absence. James pretended not to see it as he picked up Emma's after-school snacks. Such a shame about that poor blind woman, living all alone in that big house, Mrs. Peterson said loudly to no one in particular, though her eyes fixed meaningfully on James. Though I suppose she's not entirely alone anymore, is she, James? He focused on counting out exact change. Miss Reynolds Montgomery values her privacy, Mrs. Peterson. Reynolds Montgomery, Mrs. Henderson mused, shooting a warning look at Mrs. Peterson. Unusual name, that. Reminds me of something I read. She trailed off, glancing at the newspaper. She's not alone. Emma piped up from beside James, loyal as always. She has us, and she knows everything about stars and books, and she makes the best cookies, and James squeezed her shoulder gently. Remember what we talked about, sweetheart. Some things are just for us to know. The bell above the store door chimed as Thomas, Sarah's driver, entered. The townspeople fell silent, watching as he collected Sarah's weekly grocery order. James noticed how precisely each item was labeled in Braille, how specific the brands were, little details that might mean nothing to others but spoke volumes to him now. Mr. Cooper, Thomas nodded, professional as always, but with a warm smile for Emma. Miss Reynolds Montgomery asked if you might come by earlier today, something about a special delivery she needs assistance with. Of course, James replied, grateful for the excuse to leave. As they stepped out of the store, he could feel the weight of curious eyes following them. The autumn air carried fragments of conversation from the sidewalk cafe across the street. Heard she used to run some big company? Wonder why? She chose our town. That bookstore owner seems to know more than he's telling. Emma skipped ahead, oblivious to the undertones. Daddy, can we show Sarah the new constellation book that came in? She said she used to study astronomy in... What was that place? Cambridge, James reminded her quietly, steering them away from. The curious onlookers. At Sarah's house, they found her in the garden, wind chimes dancing around her as she ran her fingers over a newly delivered package. "James," she called out, recognizing his footsteps, "I hope you don't mind the early summons. I needed a trusted pair of eyes." The package contained a simple cardboard box, but the return address made James's breath catch. Reynolds Montgomery. "Industries, London office." "Corporate matters," Sarah explained, sensing his hesitation. "Nothing exciting, just documents that need organizing. Though," she smiled in Emma's direction, "there might be a smaller package there for a certain young artist." Emma's delighted squeal, as she discovered a set of professional-grade colored pencils, momentarily pushed aside James's growing concerns. But later, after Emma had settled into her homework spot, Sarah caught his sleeve. "The town's talking, isn't it?" she asked softly. "They're curious," he admitted. "It's a small town. People notice things." Sarah's fingers worried at her necklace. "And does it bother you? The speculation?" "No," he answered honestly, "but I worry it might bother you. If they figure out—" "Let them wonder," she interrupted. With a flash of the authority he sometimes glimpsed beneath her gentle exterior. "The only opinions I care about are in this house right now." From inside, Emma's voice called out, "Sarah, can you help me with my science homework? It's about light refraction, and Daddy's terrible at physics." "Terrible at physics?" Sarah repeated, arching an eyebrow. "Absolutely dreadful," James agreed, grateful for the moment of levity. "It's why I stuck to literature." Sarah's laugh echoed through the garden, bright and genuine, making several heads turn from the street beyond her property wall. But for once, James didn't care about the observers. Let them talk. They could never understand the real story unfolding. Behind these walls, between these three people who had somehow found each other. "Come on," Sarah smiled, taking his arm. "Let's go teach your daughter about the beauty of light and shadows." She paused, adding softly, "Some things are clearer when you stop worrying about how others see them." The classical music drifted through the library's open windows, Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata painting the evening air with melancholy beauty. Sarah had mentioned earlier that music helped her think more clearly now, replacing the visual memories she could no longer access. "I have loved the stars too fondly to be fearful of the night," James read, his voice low and intimate in the gathering dusk. The astronomy book had been Sarah's request. She'd confessed to missing her old observatory. Views of the night sky. "Galileo," Sarah murmured, leaning back in her chair. "Though technically he never said those exact words." She smiled, turning her face toward James. "I used to stargaze for hours at my family's summer house in Vermont. The Perseid meteor showers were magnificent there." James watched her face as she spoke, the way her expressions shifted with remembered joy. The music swelled around them, and something in the air seemed to change, becoming charged with possibility. "What's it like?" she asked suddenly. "The sunset. Right now." He set the book aside, moving to stand by her chair. "It's painting everything gold. The lights catching the dust motes in the air, making them look like floating stars. Your hair has copper highlights in this light, and the shadows are growing longer, softer." Sarah reached out, her hand finding his arm with uncanny accuracy. "Help me up? I want to feel the last warmth of it." James guided her to the window, suddenly acutely aware of how close they were standing. Sarah's hand slid down his arm to find his fingers, and he instinctively interlaced them with his own. "The sun feels like honey on my face," she whispered. "Warm and sweet. Is it very red?" "Deep orange," he corrected softly, "like the heart of a flame. It's turning the clouds pink and purple." Sarah's other hand moved hesitantly toward his face. "May I?" His throat tight with emotion, James gently took her wrist and guided her fingers to his cheek. She traced the lines of his face with feather-light touches, building a picture she could never see. "You're smiling," she observed, her fingers finding the curve of his lips. "Yes," he managed, barely a whisper. The music reached a crescendo as Sarah tilted her face up toward his. James found himself leaning down, drawn by an irresistible gravity. Her breath ghosted across his lips, and the last rays of sunlight painted them both in liquid gold. "Daddy, Sarah, look what I made in art class." Emma's voice shattered the moment like a stone through glass. They jumped apart as she burst into the library, proudly waving a papier-mâché solar system. "It's amazing, sweetheart," James said quickly, his voice rougher than usual. He cleared his throat. "Why don't you show Sarah how you made the rings of Saturn?" Emma bounced over to Sarah, who had composed herself remarkably fast. James watched as she knelt down to carefully feel each planet Emma placed in her hands, asking questions and offering praise. But he couldn't help noticing how her cheeks remained flushed, how her fingers trembled slightly as they traced the papier-mâché surfaces. "Miss Collins said mine was the best, because I remembered about the tilts of the planet's axes, just like you taught me, Sarah." Emma beamed. "Can we hang it in here, please? Then you can feel it whenever you want to remember the solar system." "And think that's a wonderful idea," Sarah smiled, but James caught the slight strain in her voice. "Why don't you and your father find the perfect spot for it?" As they hung Emma's project, the music shifted to Debussy's Clair de Lune. Sarah remained by the window, her face turned toward the last remnants of sunset, one hand pressed against the glass, as if trying to capture the warmth that was quickly fading. Later, after Emma had gone home with her father, Sarah sat alone in the library. Her fingers found the spine of the astronomy book they'd been reading, tracing the embossed title. The almost kiss lingered in her mind like a phantom touch, sweet and painful at once. "What am I doing?" she whispered to the empty room, her other hand clutching the business letter she'd received that morning, its braille message heavy with responsibilities she'd been trying to forget. The music played on, filling the darkness with its bittersweet melody while outside. The first stars began to appear in the twilight sky. Stars she could no longer see, but somehow felt more deeply than ever before. The hospital bracelet on Emma's tiny wrist seemed to glow under the harsh fluorescent lights. James stared at it, the printed words blurring before his eyes. Cooper, Emma, age 8, admitted 2:47 p.m. Status, under observation. "Mr. Cooper?" The nurse's voice pulled him from his daze. "Your daughter's asking for you." He found Emma looking impossibly small in the emergency room bed, her face pale except for the angry red scrape along her cheek. The school playground accident had happened so fast. A fall from the monkey bars, a hard landing, and a frightening moment of unconsciousness that had prompted the immediate ambulance call. "Hey, sunshine," he managed, trying to keep his voice steady as he sat beside her. "Is Sarah coming?" Emma's voice was small, worried. "I didn't mean to mess up our reading time." James's throat tightened. He'd left a rushed message with Sarah's answering service, too panicked to think clearly at the time. "Sweetheart, Sarah probably can't." "I'm right here." Sarah's voice came from the doorway, where Thomas stood supporting her elbow. "Emma, darling, I'm here." She moved toward the bed with surprising sureness, her cane forgotten in Thomas's hands. Her fingers found Emma's arm, then her face, gently tracing the injury. "Oh, my brave girl, does it hurt very much?" "Not too bad." Emma tried to sound tough, but her voice wavered. "The doctor said I have a concussion," James supplied, watching in amazement as Sarah perched on the edge of the bed. Her designer dress incongruous against the sterile hospital sheets. "They want to keep her overnight for observation," he continued, "but the scans look good. No serious damage." Sarah's hand found his on the bedsheet, squeezing tight. "What do you need? Whatever it is, just ask." James faltered, the weight of the situation hitting him. "The bookstore. I can't close tomorrow. There's a major delivery coming, but Emma needs—" "I'll stay with her," Sarah said immediately. "All night if necessary." "Sarah, I couldn't ask." "You're not asking, I'm telling." There was that tone again, the one that hinted at boardrooms and executive decisions. "Thomas will handle the store delivery, won't you, Thomas?" "Of course, Miss Reynolds Montgomery." The driver nodded, though James noticed he carefully avoided eye contact. A doctor appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Cooper? A word about the insurance paperwork?" James's stomach clenched. His basic insurance would cover some of it, but with the bookstore's recent struggles... "Go!" Sarah urged softly. "Emma and I will start our own story, won't we, sweetheart?" "Can you tell me about the stars again?" Emma asked, already sounding brighter. "The ones you used to study?" James followed the doctor into the hallway, his mind spinning. The words deductible and out-of-pocket maximum floated around him like angry wasps. He was barely processing the forms being thrust into his hands when Sarah's lawyer appeared, somehow already there despite the late hour. "Mr. Cooper." Harrison nodded briskly. "Miss Reynolds Montgomery asked me to handle the paperwork. She's adding Emma to her private insurance policy as a dependent of a household employee, retroactive to this morning." "She... what?" "No, I couldn't possibly... James." Harrison's voice softened slightly. "Let her do this. She's..." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "She's in a position to help, and she cares deeply for your daughter." From Emma's room came the sound of quiet laughter. James looked back to see Sarah describing constellations with her hands, painting pictures in the air, while Emma watched in delighted fascination, pain momentarily forgotten. "I need to maintain some boundaries," James said weakly, even as his heart twisted at the scene. Harrison's expression was unreadable. "Sometimes the boundaries we think we need are the very walls keeping us from what matters most." He held out a pen. "Sign here. Let her help your daughter." Later that night, after Emma had finally drifted off to sleep, James found Sarah still sitting vigilant by the bed, her hand resting protectively near Emma's. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. "But you have to let me repay..." "Don't." She cut him off softly. "Please, money is... it's just numbers, James. This..." Her free hand gestured to Emma, to the space between them. "This is real. This matters." He sank into the chair beside her, exhausted. Without thinking, he took her hand, needing an anchor in the storm of the day's emotions. Sarah's fingers interlaced with his immediately, holding on just as tight. "Was so scared," she admitted in a whisper. "When Harrison told me Emma was hurt, I've never felt so blind, so helpless. I needed to be here to know she was okay, to know you were okay." The hospital bracelet on Emma's wrist caught the dim light as she shifted in her sleep, a plastic reminder of how quickly life could change. James looked at his daughter, at their joined hands, at the woman who had somehow become essential to their world, and realized some boundaries had already been crossed, whether he was ready or not. The business magazine lay open on Sarah's desk, where Thomas had forgotten to put it away, its glossy cover catching the morning light. James wouldn't have noticed it, except Emma's accident had disrupted their usual routines, and he was helping. Organize Sarah's study while she rested. The hospital vigil had exhausted her. Forbes 500, the visionaries reshaping global industry, blazed across the cover. And there, in a photo that made his heart stop, was Sarah, a younger Sarah before the accident, standing confidently in front of the Reynolds Montgomery Industries headquarters. Her eyes, visible, striking, and full of determination, stared directly into the camera. CEO Sarah Reynolds Montgomery revolutionizes tech industry with breakthrough AI integration, the headline declared. Youngest female CEO to break $10 billion market valuation. James's hands trembled as he picked up the magazine. The publication date was just 6 months ago. The article detailed Sarah's meteoric rise, her innovative leadership, the global empire she'd built. Words jumped out at him. Billionaire, tech mogul, industry pioneer. The sound of wind chimes stirred him from his shock. Sarah would be expecting him in the garden for their morning reading. He carefully returned the magazine to its exact position, his mind spinning. Suddenly, 100 small details clicked into place. The designer clothes, the rare first editions, Harrison's constant presence, the way Thomas handled things with military precision, The mysterious phone calls, the Braille financial reports, the carefully maintained privacy. "James?" Sarah's voice drifted in from the garden. "Is everything all right?" He walked out to find her in her usual spot, surrounded by the late autumn flowers. She turned her face toward him, and for the first time he truly saw the woman from the magazine beneath the careful facade of his quiet employer. "Just finishing up in the study," he managed, his voice surprisingly steady. "The usual spot for reading?" Sarah smiled, patting the chair beside her. "Actually, I was thinking we could try something different today. Remember how Emma asked about my old astronomy work? I had Thomas bring something from storage." She reached beside her chair and produced a complex model of the solar system, clearly expensive and expertly crafted. "I used to use this for lectures. Would you describe it to me? I'm afraid my memories of it are getting fuzzy." James sat down, taking the model in his hands. The planets were made of precious stones. He recognized lapis lazuli for Earth, red jasper for Mars, tiger's eye for Jupiter. This single teaching tool probably cost more than his bookstore made in a year. "It's beautiful," he said honestly. "The craftsmanship is incredible. It was a gift from my board of directors after my first successful year as CEO, Sarah said softly, then froze, realizing what she'd revealed. The words hung in the air between them. James watched as her hands twisted in her lap, waiting for him to respond. "The planets are made of semi-precious stones," he continued instead, choosing each word carefully. "Earth is this beautiful deep blue, like the color of your eyes in the magazine photo." Sarah's breath caught. "How long have you known?" "About 10 seconds ago for certain, but I've suspected for a while." He set the model aside. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because this," she gestured between them, "all of this, you, Emma, our readings, the quiet moments, it's the first real thing I've had in years. Before the accident, people only saw the CEO, the billionaire, the tech visionary." Her voice caught. "But you and Emma, you just saw Sarah, just me." James thought about the woman who sat on a hospital floor telling stories to his daughter, who laughed at his terrible cooking attempts, who found such joy in simple moments of connection. "Is that why you came here? To escape?" Sarah shook her head. "To find something genuine. After I lost my sight, everyone either pitied me or worried about the company's future. I needed to know if someone could care about me without all the trappings of wealth and power. If I could still matter as just a person." "You've always mattered," James said quietly. "Your money doesn't change who you are with Emma or—" He hesitated, then finished. "Or with me." Sarah reached for his hand, and he met her halfway, their fingers intertwining with familiar ease. The morning sun warmed their faces, and the wind chimes sang their gentle symphony. "What happens now?" she whispered. James looked at their joined hands, at the expensive model beside them, at the garden where his daughter had slowly brought laughter back into this remarkable woman's life. "Now," he said softly, "you tell me the rest of your story, the real one, and we figure out where our stories go from here." The employee ID badge had slipped behind Sarah's desk during cleaning, a small plastic rectangle that captured another life. In the photo, Sarah stood against a corporate backdrop, her dark hair swept into a professional style, eyes bright with ambition. Sarah Reynolds Montgomery, CEO, gleamed in gold lettering beneath her image. The badge's issue date was just 2 weeks before her accident. James sat in his bookstore's back office after hours, the badge on his desk beside his laptop. Emma was at a sleepover, giving him a rare evening alone with his thoughts and his growing collection of articles about Sarah's former life. "Reynolds Montgomery Industries revolutionizes adaptive technology," one headline proclaimed. He clicked through videos of Sarah giving keynote speeches, her passion evident as she described making technology accessible to those with disabilities. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. "Our mission isn't just profit," Screen Sarah declared. Confidently, it's about ensuring everyone has access to tools that can change their lives. The conviction in her voice matched perfectly with the woman who now spent hours helping Emma with science projects. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Missing our evening reading. The house feels too quiet without you both. James smiled, remembering how just that morning she'd insisted on making coffee herself, navigating her kitchen with stubborn independence. The same determination he now saw in countless interviews and presentations. Another article detailed her emergency response after the accident. CEO returns to work. Just 3 months after losing sight. The accompanying photo showed Sarah learning Braille, her face set in concentration, the same expression she wore when memorizing the layout of her garden or learning the sound of each wind chime. He found himself on a technology blog that had covered the accident itself. Rising tech star, injured in private plane malfunction. The details were sparse. An equipment failure, a crash landing, a miracle survival. Sarah had never mentioned it. But now he understood why she tensed at sudden loud noises, why she preferred to feel grounded in her garden. The deeper he dug, the more he discovered a woman who had always defied expectations. Youngest person too. Make partner at her consulting firm. First female CEO in her industry sector, philanthropist who funded STEM programs for underprivileged girls. Every achievement shadowed by whispers about her family name, questions about whether she deserved her position. A video from 6 months ago showed her last public appearance as CEO. She stood before her board of directors, voice steady as she announced her temporary leave of absence. Sometimes we need to step away to find our way forward, she had said. The business world had buzzed with speculation ever since. His phone buzzed again. Sarah, found that copy of Jane Eyre you mentioned. The Braille edition feels different. Older, well-loved. Would you like to start it tomorrow? James picked up the ID badge, running his thumb over the smiling photo. The woman in the image was confident, powerful, unstoppable. But she wasn't the Sarah who helped Emma plant sunflowers, who laughed at his terrible puns, who found such joy in simple moments of connection. Or rather, she was both, the CEO and the woman who read stories with his daughter, the tech visionary, and the gentle soul who was teaching him to see the world through new eyes, the billionaire and the person who just wanted to be loved for herself. He opened his laptop one last time, finding a recent stock report. Reynolds Montgomery Industries was thriving under temporary leadership, but shareholders were growing restless. They wanted their visionary CEO back. The business empire Sarah had built needed her, but here in this small town, in her quiet garden, with its wind chimes and flowers, Sarah had built something else. Something that couldn't be measured in stock prices or market shares. James carefully placed the ID badge in an envelope, sealing it. Tomorrow he would return it to Sarah's desk, exactly where he'd found it. Not because he wanted to hide his discovery, but because he understood now that identity badge belonged to a different chapter of her story. His phone lit up once more. Sarah. Emma called to say goodnight. She made me promise we'd wait for her before starting the new book. She says 3-person reading clubs can't break the rules. James smiled, typing back, "Some rules are worth keeping." The ID badge sat in its envelope, a relic of Sarah's past, but her future, that was still unwritten, and somehow, improbably, wonderfully, it had become entwined with his own. The leather-bound family photo album was heavy in Sarah's lap, its pages thick with memories she could no longer see. She'd asked James to bring it down from her storage room, her fingers trembling slightly as they traced the embossed cover. You sure about this?" James asked softly, sitting beside her on the library sofa. Emma sprawled on the floor at their feet, homework temporarily forgotten. "It's time," Sarah nodded. "Emma, sweetheart, would you like to help me share some stories? Real stories. About you." Emma scrambled up eagerly, squeezing into the space between them. Sarah opened the album, her fingers finding the first page with practiced ease. "James, could you describe this one?" "It's a little girl in a party dress standing on a massive staircase," he began, then caught his breath. "She has your eyes, Sarah. That was my 6th birthday." Sarah smiled. "The dress was blue silk and I'd insisted on wearing my mother's pearls. The same ones you tried on, Emma. I nearly tripped on that grand staircase, trying to make a proper lady's entrance." Emma giggled. "Did you live in a castle?" "It felt like one sometimes." "That was our family home in Massachusetts. 26 rooms, and somehow I always ended up reading in the kitchen with our cook, Mrs. Sullivan. She made the best chocolate chip cookies." "Better than ours?" Emma asked, protective of their baking sessions. "Different," Sarah said diplomatically. "Less love in them." James turned the page, and a teenage Sarah smiled up at them, holding a telescope. "Science fair," he guessed. "First place," Sarah nodded. "I'd built a computerized star tracking system. My father was so proud. It was the first time I'd combined the family's tech business with my love of astronomy. He framed the blueprint and hung it in his office." Her voice caught slightly. Emma, intuitive as always, took her hand. "Do you miss him?" "Every day. He died just before I took over the company. He always said the stars would guide me home, no matter how far I wandered." Sarah squeezed Emma's hand. "He would have adored you, sweetheart." The next photo made James pause. "You're at a podium. There's a crowd, and you're holding up some kind of award." "Ah," Sarah's smile turned bittersweet. "My first major innovation announcement. We developed technology to help disabled children communicate through adaptive interfaces. The company stock doubled that day, but all I cared about were the letters. From parents saying their children could finally tell them I love you." Emma studied the photo intently. "You look like a superhero." "I felt like one," Sarah admitted, "until I learned that even superheroes can't see in the dark." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken thoughts. James watched as Sarah's fingers traced the edge of the next page, hesitating. "This next section," she said quietly, "is from after, when I was learning to navigate my new world. Thomas took most of these photos. He thought it was important to document the journey, even if I couldn't see it. The images told their own story. Sarah learning Braille, working with mobility specialists, giving speeches with her new dark glasses. In each one, her smile became more practiced, more guarded. "Why did you come here?" Emma asked suddenly. "To our town?" Sarah closed the album gently. "Because sometimes, when you lose one way of seeing, you have to find another. I had everything the world said was important: money, power, success. But I couldn't see any of it anymore. I needed to learn how to see with my heart. And can you see with your heart now?" Emma's voice was small, worried. "Oh, my darling girl." Sarah gathered Emma close. "I see more clearly now than I ever did before. I see your father's kindness in the way he reads stories. I see your joy in the way you laugh. I see love in the simple act of sharing cookies and stargazing and everyday moments." James watched them, his throat tight with emotion. The album sat closed on Sarah's lap, a bridge between her past and present. Through its pages, he'd glimpsed the woman she'd been, but here, holding his daughter with tears gleaming behind her dark glasses, she'd never been more beautiful. "There are more photos," Sarah continued, "from charity galas and board meetings and business trips around the world. But somehow, none of them feel as important as the pictures Emma draws for my refrigerator now." "Can I take a picture of us?" Emma asked. "For your album, so you'll have a new memory." Sarah's smile wobbled. "I'd love that." "James," he pulled out his phone, capturing the moment. Sarah and Emma on the sofa, the family album between them, both their faces glowing with affection. "A new photo for a new chapter." "Perfect," he said softly, and he wasn't just talking about the picture. The eviction notice crackled in James's hands, its harsh red lettering seeming to pulse in the bookstore's dim morning light. "Final notice. Payment required within 7 days." He'd been expecting it, watching his savings dwindle despite the extra income from working with Sarah. The hospital bills from Emma's accident, even with Sarah's insurance help, had been the final blow. "Daddy?" Emma's voice drew his attention. She stood in the children's corner, surrounded by the beloved books they'd read together countless times. "Are we going to lose the store?" Before he could answer, the bell above the door chimed. Sarah stepped in, guided by Thomas, her face concerned. "James?" Emma wasn't at the house for our usual morning reading. "I wanted to help Daddy sort books," Emma said, but her voice wavered. Sarah's head tilted, catching the tension in the air. "What's wrong?" James looked at the notice in his hands, then at his daughter's worried face. "The landlord's selling the building. New owners want market rate. Rent. I have a week to either come up with 3 months back rent plus a massive deposit or—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "How much?" Sarah asked quietly. "Sarah, no. How much, James?" He named the figure, the number burning his throat like acid. Sarah's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on her cane. "I could write a check right now," she said softly. "It would be nothing to me. Less than I spent on office furniture for 1 floor of my corporate headquarters. No." James's voice was rough. "That's exactly why I can't accept it." Emma looked between them, confusion clear on her face. "But Sarah helps us with other things, like my hospital bills and—" "This is different, sweetheart," James interrupted gently. "The store was Grandpa's dream. He built it from nothing. If I can't keep it going on my own, then you'll what?" Sarah's voice had taken on an edge he recognized from her CEO days. "Let it fail? Let all those children lose their local bookstore? Let your father's legacy disappear because of pride?" The word hit him like a physical blow. "It's not about pride." "Then, what is it about?" Sarah stepped forward, unerringly finding her way through the familiar aisles. "Help me understand, James. Because from where I stand, and yes, I appreciate the irony of that phrase, you're choosing to let something precious slip away when there's a simple solution." "Simple?" James laughed bitterly. "There's nothing simple about taking money from—" He caught himself, but not quickly enough. "From what? A blind woman? A friend?" Sarah's voice dropped. "Or from someone you're starting to have feelings for?" Emma's small gasp reminded them they weren't alone. "Daddy, do you love Sarah?" The question hung in the air like suspended dust motes in the morning light. James looked at Sarah. Elegant, even in casual clothes, offering help he desperately needed, but couldn't accept without changing everything between them. "Emma, why don't you go help Thomas bring in those new audiobooks from the car?" Sarah suggested gently. Once the bell chimed. Behind them, she turned back to James. "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering investment in something I believe in. This store, these books, what you do here, it matters." "And what happens after?" James asked quietly. "When you eventually go back to your real life?" Sarah flinched. "Is that what you think this is? Some kind of vacation from reality? Isn't it? Sarah, you're the CEO of a global technology empire. Your board is already pressuring you to return. I read the business news. Your temporary replacement is struggling with the new Asian expansion. So, you've been investigating me." Her tone was carefully neutral, "trying to understand you," he corrected, "trying to figure out how someone like you could fit into a life like mine." Sarah was silent for a long moment, her face turned toward the window where early morning light was beginning to stream in. Finally, she reached into her purse and pulled out a check, already filled out in the precise handwriting of her lawyer. "This is an investment, not a gift," she said, placing it on the counter, "with proper business terms, interest rates, and repayment schedules. Take it or don't, that's your choice. But don't you dare make that choice based on who you think I am or what you think I'll do in the future." She turned to leave, then paused. "You know what I see when I come in here, James? I see possibility. I see dreams. I see a place where a little girl can discover worlds through stories, where a community finds its heart, where a man's love for books becomes a legacy. And I see it all without using my eyes at all." The eviction notice felt heavier than ever. in James's hands as he watched her leave, Thomas materializing at her elbow to guide her to the car. Through the window, he saw Emma showing her something, probably her latest drawing, and Sarah's face lit up with that genuine smile he'd grown to treasure. The check sat on the counter between two worlds, his and hers, waiting for him to decide which mattered more, his pride or his father's dream. The torn check lay between them on Sarah's garden table, ripped perfectly in half with trembling fingers. James hadn't meant to do it, had come to apologize, to explain, to find some middle ground. But then he'd seen Harrison leaving her study, heard fragments of conversation about board meetings and return dates, and something had snapped. "How dare you?" Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. Gone was the gentle woman who read with Emma. This was the CEO who commanded a global empire. "That wasn't just money, James. That was me trying to help someone I care about. By solving everything with your checkbook." The words burst out before he could stop them. "Is that how you're used to handling problems in your world? Just throw money at them until they go away?" "My world!" Sarah stood, her hands gripping the table's edge. "And what world is that exactly? The one where I worked 80-hour weeks building something from nothing? The one where I had to prove myself twice as hard because people assumed I was just Daddy's little rich girl? Or maybe you mean the world that went dark around me while I was still conscious in that plane, listening to the pilots trying to save us?" James flinched. She'd never talked about the accident before. "Sarah, I know you wanted honesty. Let's have it." She was trembling now. "You think I don't know what people see? Poor blind billionaire playing at small-town life? But this quiet garden, these simple moments, you and Emma, this is the most real thing I've had in years. And you're so wrapped up in your pride that you can't even see it." "That's not fair," James protested. "I'm trying to protect what? Your independence, your dignity." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, James Cooper? A man so afraid of being seen as a charity case that he'd rather let his father's legacy crumble than accept help from someone who—" She cut herself off abruptly. "From someone who what?" James stepped closer, his heart pounding. "From someone who loves you," she whispered, the words falling between them like stones in still water. The garden went silent, except for the wind chimes. Even they seemed to hold their breath. "You don't know what you're saying," James managed finally. "You're confused. These past months, playing at normal life." "Playing?" Sarah's voice cracked. "Is that what you think I've been doing? Playing. House with you and Emma. Testing out what normal life feels like before I go back to my real world, isn't it?" The words hurt to say, but he forced them out. "Your board is calling. Harrison's been here every day this week. The company needs you. And what if I need this more?" Sarah reached for him, her hand finding his chest unerringly. "What if I need your daughter's laughter and your voice reading stories and these quiet moments more than I need board meetings and quarterly reports?" "Sarah, no. Listen to me." Her other hand came up to frame his face. "I lost my sight." "James, not my judgment. I know exactly what I'm feeling. I know exactly what I want. The question is, do you?" He covered her hands with his own, torn between pulling her closer and stepping away. "It's not that simple. Because you won't let it be." Frustration colored her voice. "You've known who I am for weeks now. You've researched me, learned about my company, my wealth, my past, but you're still treating me like I'm two different people, the Sarah you care about and the CEO you can't trust. Because I don't know how to reconcile them." The admission burst from him. "How do I trust that this is real? That tomorrow you won't wake up and realize you miss your old life? That Emma won't get her heart broken when I what? Leave? Go back to my real life?" Sarah stepped back, and the loss of contact felt physical. "I've spent months proving who I really am, what really matters to me, but you're so convinced I'm going to leave that you won't let me stay." A small sound from the doorway made them both freeze. Emma stood there, tears streaming down her face. "Emma, sweetheart," James started, but she turned and ran, her footsteps fading into the house. Sarah's face crumpled. "Go," she said softly. "Go after her. She needs you." James hesitated, looking at the torn check on the table, at the woman he'd come to love despite every defense he'd tried to maintain. "This isn't finished," he said. "No," Sarah agreed, her voice heavy with unshed tears. "But right now, your daughter needs her father. We can finish breaking each other's hearts later." As James turned to follow Emma, he caught one last glimpse of Sarah in her garden. She stood straight and proud, every inch the CEO she'd been born to be, but her hands were shaking as she reached for the torn pieces of the check, reaching, as always, for a way to help, even when he wouldn't let her. The empty reading chair sat accusingly in Sarah's library, untouched for a week since the argument. Dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight that streamed through the windows, settling on the closed books and silent spaces where family had briefly bloomed. Sarah stood in the doorway, one hand trailing along the wall. Even without sight, she could feel the emptiness of the room. No Emma doing homework by the window. No James's voice bringing stories to life. No laughter. No warmth. "No life," Harrison called again. Thomas said quietly from behind her. "The board is getting impatient." "Let them," Sarah replied, moving to the chair and running her fingers along its worn arm. "What's the point of having billions if you can't buy yourself a little time to grieve? Is that what this is? Grieving?" Sarah sank into the chair, surrounded by James's lingering scent. "What else do you call it when you lose your family twice in one lifetime?" Across town, James stood in his emptying bookstore, boxing up the children's section. The "going out of business" sign in the window cast long shadows across the floor. Emma hadn't come with him today. She'd barely spoken since the fight in Sarah's garden. He picked up The Little Prince, their last unfinished story, and the memory of Sarah's voice hit him like a physical blow. What is essential is invisible to the eyes. The bell above the door chimed. "We're closed," he called out automatically, "even for old friends." Mrs. Henderson's voice was gentle. She surveyed the boxes with sad eyes. "So you're really doing it? Closing up shop?" James set the book down carefully. "Don't have much choice now." "There's always a choice, dear." She moved to the counter where Sarah's torn check still lay in an envelope. "Pride's a heavy thing to carry, sometimes heavier than accepting help from someone who loves you. It's not that simple, isn't it?" Mrs. Henderson picked up a framed photo from the counter. Emma reading to younger children during story time, her face alight with joy. "Your father built this store from nothing because he believed stories could change lives, but maybe the story that needs changing is yours." At home that evening, James found Emma in her room, surrounded by her drawings. One caught his eye. Sarah, in her garden, face turned toward the sun, wind chimes dancing around her. The detail was remarkable, every curve of Sarah's smile captured perfectly. "I miss her, Daddy," Emma whispered. "She teaches me things you can't see with your eyes, like how to listen to wind chimes and know where you are, or how to feel stories instead of just reading them." James sat heavily on Emma's bed. "I miss her too, Sunshine." "Then why can't we go back? Because she has lots of money? That's stupid." The blunt honesty of childhood cut straight to his heart. "It's complicated, Emma." "No, it's not. You're just scared." Emma gathered her drawings close. "Sarah taught me that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing things even when you are scared." Back in her silent house, Sarah sat at her desk, fingers running over Braille documents. Quarterly reports, merger proposals, urgent board matters, all demanding her return to a world that once defined her. The wind chimes stirred in the evening breeze, playing the melody that usually meant James and Emma were arriving. But tonight, like every night this week, they remained just wind chimes. Her fingers found a different paper, Emma's last drawing, carefully preserved with a raised outline she could trace. "Our family," Emma had called it without hesitation or doubt. The intercom buzzed. "Miss Reynolds Montgomery? The car is ready for tomorrow's board meeting in the city." Sarah closed her eyes behind her dark glasses, though it made no difference to her vision. The empty reading chair waited in the library, holding memories like ghosts. "Tell them I'm not coming," she said finally. "But the board can wait. I have more important things to lose right now." In his apartment, James stared at the bookstore's ledgers, red ink bleeding across the pages. In 48 hours, the bailiffs would come. His father's dream would end, not with a bang, but with the quiet shuffle of inventory being boxed up and carted away. Emma's voice drifted from her room as she talked to her stuffed animals. And then Sarah said sometimes the best stories are the ones where people have to be really brave and really honest, even when it's hard. The empty chair in Sarah's library, the torn check in his drawer, the space between them filled with pride, and fear and things left unsaid. Sometimes, James thought, the hardest stories to live are the ones where you have to admit you were wrong. The handwritten letter sat unopened on Sarah's breakfast tray, Emma's careful schoolgirl script visible through the envelope. Thomas had described it as he placed it beside her morning coffee. Purple ink, slight smudges where tears had fallen, and a small drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands. "Dear Sarah," Thomas read at her quiet request, his usual professional tone softening. "I know grown-ups sometimes forget how to fix things when they're broken, but you taught me that just because you can't see something doesn't mean it isn't. They're like the stars in the daytime. I think maybe Daddy's love is like that too. He just can't see it right now because he's scared." Sarah's hands trembled around her coffee cup as Thomas continued. "The bookstore is almost empty now. All the kids who come for story time keep asking when we're coming back to you. I told them you're like the mom in The Secret Garden. You just got lost for a little while, but you'll find your way home if we leave the door open. Miss Emma has quite a way with metaphors," Thomas observed gently. "She gets that from her father," Sarah whispered. "What else does she say?" "Remember how you said sometimes the bravest thing is asking for help? Maybe you could help Daddy be brave, because he misses you too. I hear him at night, reading our old stories and crying a little. Please don't tell him I told you that." A tear slipped beneath Sarah's dark glasses. "Is there more?" "Just one last part. P.S. The wind chimes miss us too. I can hear them when I walk past your house. They sound sad now. Love, Emma." Sarah stood abruptly, moving to the window where the morning breeze stirred her garden's chimes. "Thomas, I need you to take me somewhere." Across town, James was cataloguing the last of the store's inventory when Mrs. Henderson burst through the door, bell jingling urgently. "James Cooper, you need to come now. The whole town's gathering at the community center." "I'm a little busy dismantling my life here," he replied wearily. "Trust me, son, you want to see this." Something in her tone made him follow. Outside, people streamed toward the community center, whispers and excitement floating on the morning air. Inside, he stopped dead. Sarah stood at the podium, elegant in a business suit, dark glasses gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Emma sat in the front row, practically vibrating with anticipation. The room was packed with townspeople, all watching with curious eyes. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Sarah began, her CEO voice in full effect. "I owe this community an explanation and, perhaps more importantly, an apology." James started to back away, but Mrs. Henderson's surprisingly strong grip held him in place. "Many of you have probably guessed, or read in the business papers, who I really am," Sarah continued. "Sarah Reynolds Montgomery, CEO of Reynolds Montgomery Industries. But that's not why I'm here today. I'm here as just Sarah, a woman who came to your town looking for something authentic and found more than she ever imagined." She paused, turning her face toward where she knew Emma sat. "I found a little girl who taught me to see with my heart. I found a community that valued me for who I am, not what I own. And I found a man whose integrity and dedication to his father's legacy reminded me of what really matters in life." James's throat tightened as Sarah pulled out a document. "Which is why Reynolds Montgomery Industries is establishing its new rural literary initiative. with its first project being the preservation and expansion of historic independent bookstores in small towns across America. Starting with Cooper's books. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sarah held up her hand for quiet. But this isn't about corporate charity. This is about investment in community, in stories, in the places that make a town feel like home. And her voice softened, becoming more personal. It's about me finally being brave enough to admit that some things are worth more than pride or fear. She stepped away from the podium and with unerring accuracy turned toward where James stood. You once asked me if I was just playing at normal life. The truth is, I've never felt more real than I did reading stories with you and Emma. My company, my wealth, they're part of who I am, yes. But they're not all I am. And if you can accept all of me, then maybe we can write a new story together. Emma's letter crinkled in Sarah's hand as she pulled it out. Your daughter reminded me that sometimes the bravest thing is asking for help. So I'm asking James Cooper, let me help, not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, but as someone who loves your daughter, who loves your dedication to sharing stories, who loves... She faltered for the first time, and in that moment of vulnerability, James saw past the polished CEO to the woman who had laughed with his daughter over cookies, who had taught him to see the world through new eyes. Who loves you, she finished softly, the words carrying clearly in the hushed room. Pride and all. The business contract lay unsigned on Sarah's desk, its implications heavier than its physical weight. Transfer of executive control, read the header in both printed text and braille. Below waited 2 signature lines, one that would make her Chief Innovation Officer instead of CEO, and another that would transfer day-to-day operations to her chosen successor. The board is prepared to accept these terms, Harrison said quietly, though they're rather unprecedented. So is a blind CEO finding her way back to seeing what matters. Sarah replied, her fingers tracing the embossed letterhead. Is James here yet? In the garden with Emma. They're setting up some sort of surprise. Sarah smiled, hearing the distant sound of her wind chimes mingling with Emma's laughter. A week had passed since her public declaration at the community center. A week of careful conversations and rebuilt trust. Before you sign, Harrison hesitated, are you absolutely certain? You've built this company from the ground up. To step back now. I'm not stepping back, Sarah corrected. I'm stepping forward. The company needs someone who can travel the world, who can read facial expressions in boardrooms, who can navigate the visual demands of global leadership. But it also needs someone who understands that innovation isn't just about technology. It's about changing lives. She stood, moving with confidence through her house. Did you know James has already proposed 5 new adaptive technology projects based on his experiences reading to me? He sees possibilities I never considered, even when I could see. The garden. Door opened to the sound of scrambling and poorly suppressed giggles. No peeking, Emma called out, then caught herself. I mean, no feeling around with your hands. Is that any way to treat your future business partner's mother? Sarah teased, using the term deliberately. The silence that followed was profound. Then Emma's voice, small and hopeful. Really? Really, James answered, and Sarah's heart swelled at the pride in his voice. Want to show Sarah what we've been working on? Small hands took hers, guiding them to what felt like a book. But as her fingers explored further, she realized it was a model, crafted from wood and metal. It's the new children's reading room, Emma explained excitedly. See, these raised lines show where the bookshelves will be, and this textured part is a special storytime area with cushions. And here, she moved Sarah's hands to different sections, describing each feature. We thought, James added softly, that the Rural Literary Initiative might want to make all its locations accessible to everyone, not just a few Braille books in the corner, but a complete experience designed for all kinds of readers. Sarah explored the model, throat tight with emotion. Here was the perfect fusion of her 2 worlds, the innovation she'd built her company on, married to the simple joy of sharing stories. Harrison, she called out, bring the contracts out here. Sarah, James started. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned toward his voice, but not for the reasons you think. When I lost my sight, I thought I was losing everything that defined me, my independence, my ability to lead, my future. I threw myself into proving I could still be the same CEO I was before. But then I met a stubborn bookstore owner and his remarkable daughter, and they showed me that sometimes letting go of who you were is the only way to become who you're meant to be. She heard Harrison approaching with the papers. This contract doesn't just change my role at the company, it changes how we do business. The Rural Literary Initiative isn't a charitable project. It's the future of Reynolds Montgomery Industries. Adaptive technology, accessible education, community investment. And I want you, James Cooper, to help me build it. As what? His voice was careful, measured. Your employee? Sarah smiled, reaching for him. When her hands found his face, she felt the tension there. As my partner, in every sense of the word, if you'll have me. Emma's gasp was followed by furious whispering. Daddy, this is the part where you kiss her. A laugh rumbled through James's chest. Is that so? Well, Sarah teased, I did just propose a merger of sorts. His hands covered hers where they still rested on his face. A merger implies equality. I'm still just a small-town bookstore owner. No, Sarah shook her head. You're the man who taught a blind woman to see again, who showed me that true wealth isn't in bank accounts but in moments, like this, who loved me not in spite of who I am, but because of all that I am. She felt him lean closer, his breath warm on her cheek. In that case, he murmured, I accept your terms. As their lips met, Emma's delighted squeal mixed with the garden wind chimes. Harrison quietly set down the contracts and retreated, leaving the new family to their moment. The unsigned papers waited patiently, no longer a symbol of corporate power, but a bridge between two worlds that had finally found their way to each other. The new store sign gleamed in the morning sun. Cooper and Reynolds Montgomery Family Bookstore, where every story finds its way home. Below the main text, the same message was repeated in raised braille lettering, inviting all readers to feel welcome. A bit long for a sign, James teased, describing its appearance to Sarah as they stood on the sidewalk outside the newly renovated store. Good thing we have a big storefront then, Sarah replied, squeezing his hand. She was dressed casually today, more small-town bookstore owner's wife than corporate executive. Though she somehow managed to be both with graceful ease. Emma burst out of the store, her footsteps clattering on the wooden porch. Everything's ready. Can we open now, please? Inside, the transformation was remarkable. The original charm of Cooper's books remained, but now with subtle technological innovations seamlessly integrated throughout. Adaptive reading devices sat naturally alongside traditional books. The children's section had grown into a magical space with both printed and tactile storytelling elements. And in the center, the new reading room stood as a testament to inclusive design, with its circular arrangement of comfortable seats all facing a storyteller's chair. Mrs. Henderson is already in line outside with half the town, Emma reported excitedly, and Thomas says the TV crew is setting up to cover the grand opening. Sarah tensed slightly at the mention of publicity, but James steadied her with a gentle touch. Hey, you okay? Just thinking about how far we've come, she said softly. A year ago, I was hiding from the world. Now I'm helping build a new one. The store had become the pilot location for Reynolds Montgomery Industries' Rural Literary Initiative. Already, 3 other small-town bookstores had signed on to be part of the program, with dozens more expressing interest. But this one would always be special. This was where their story had begun. Daddy! Sarah! Look who's here! Emma's voice carried from the front door. A group of children from her class crowded in, heading straight for the new reading corner. They'd helped design during community feedback sessions, story time first. One of them called out hopefully. Sarah smiled, reaching for the book they'd selected for this moment. a new copy of The Little Prince, with both printed text and braille. I think that's perfect. James, he guided her to the storytellers, a chair, but instead of taking his usual spot beside her, he lifted Emma into his lap as they sat together. Around them, children settled onto cushions, parents found comfortable seats, and even Harrison, who'd stopped by with last-minute paperwork, leaned against a bookshelf to listen. Once, when I was 6 years old, Sarah began, her fingers moving across the braille as James's voice joined hers in perfect harmony, I saw a magnificent picture in a book. They had practiced this, learning to read together, their voices weaving around each other like the wind chimes Sarah had hung near the store's entrance. Traditional and adaptive reading flowing together, just like their lives had. As they read, Emma snuggled closer to James, whispering, "This is my favorite part of the new store." "The reading corner?" "No," she said, watching Sarah's face glow with happiness as she shared the story. "The part where we're all together." The morning sun streamed through the windows, catching the metal strips that marked the aisles in both visual and tactile ways. Children leaned forward, captivated by the dual narration. Parents smiled, recognizing something special in this moment. "What makes the desert beautiful," Sarah read, her voice soft with meaning, "is that somewhere it hides a well." James watched her, remembering their first reading session in her garden. How far they'd come from employer and employee to partners. In every sense, the wedding ring on his finger caught the light. They'd married in that same garden last month, with Emma as their flower girl and the wind chimes providing natural music. Sarah had kept her position with the company, but on her own terms. 3 days a week, she worked from home on innovative projects. The other days were spent here, helping James run the bookstore that had become a model for inclusive business practices. They were building something unique together, a place where stories, love, and acceptance intertwined. As the story ended, Emma hopped up to help the other children explore the tactile art installations they'd created to accompany classic tales. Sarah found James's hand again, her thumb running over his wedding ring. "Happy?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied. "You know, for someone who couldn't see a future with a wealthy blind woman, you certainly changed your perspective." "Well," he smiled, pulling her close, "someone very wise once told me that the most essential things are invisible to the eyes." Wind chimes tinkled as another group of customers entered, their excited voices filling the store. Emma's laughter rang out as she showed her friends how to read with their fingers. And in the heart of it all, Sarah and James held on to each other, two people who had learned to see love clearly, even in the dark.